Jones, look at that balance. Here comes the Cardinal blitz. Geno Smith, light spiral, intercepted by Tyler. We're back.
Well, it's Monday night, a new week has begun. I turn on
Saw that coming, and Daffy's coming over after getting that hand hit. And then Shaq Barrett plays, looking at that hand.
The biggest game each week is there.
The touchdown. We saw Philip Lindsay come off the field indicating an issue with his right hand. You can see right there.
Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? We're ready. Are you ready for some football? A Monday night party. Hey, this is rockin' random, Hank. Ready to get the good time started.
All right, welcome in to Are You Ready for a Podcast, the official podcast of the Are You Ready for Some Football Fantasy Football League. This is going to be a very quick solo podcast from me. It is currently Saturday evening. The LSU game is nearing halftime. It's really Saturday night. It's almost 9:30. Unfortunately, Joe and I realized too late that we forgot to record a podcast this week. So I just wanted to put something out on the channel, just get a quick preview. First of all, I want to start by saying, thank you to Nick and Dan for hosting the podcast for the last 2 weeks. I know they were very upset to be left out of the channel to this point in the season, and I think they delivered some great content, very professional, well done there. They really showed what professionals can do, how they operate in this industry. So that gave us something to strive for the rest of the year. But as we look at the league right now, we're through 20 weeks. We've actually started playing week 11, and there's a little bit of clarity, but really a lot of chaos for the rest of the season. Hunter at 9-1 is in the playoffs. Maybe there's a mathematical possibility that he doesn't make it, but I find that very hard to believe. And essentially has one bye wrapped up, and then the other bye and all the playoff spots are pretty much up for grabs from there. Grant's in the pole position at 6-4, but his team actually hasn't really looked too great recently, and is 10th in scoring. So certainly not invincible. And then behind him, there's 7 more teams tied at 5-5, and then Morgan right there at 4-6 as well. And then Ben and Thomas one game behind that at 3-7. So definitely a lot that could be still decided here coming down the stretch. To quickly recap week 10, the top scorer once again was Hunter. There's been a lot of talk on the channel recently about, is Hunter a fraud? Is he not a fraud? And obviously he took that to heart, put up 145, took down Joe, and a big win for Hunter. Unfortunately, as we all know, reputations are made in the playoffs, and his reputation there is not a good one. So good win for him here. I don't know if he thought that would clear his name from being a fraud, but it really doesn't change anything from that perspective. And for Joe, another good performance. He's had a bit of tough luck this year. He's had a decent performance here, but did get the loss with 108 points, was actually third in the league this week. The next highest score was Zach, whose team seems to be rounding into form now that he's through the bye weeks, all of his star players, and he got the win 126-94 over Colin. It's been a tough few weeks for Colin. His team started off really hot and maybe had some unfortunate luck, and then has sort of now come back to the pack and is just in the mix at 5-5 after being what I thought was clearly one of the 2 top teams previous to that. And then our next highest score looks like Nick getting the win 106-104, very close over Austin. Austin actually had this really close all the way down on Monday night whenever the Dallas Goedert fumble and injury happened, and he only lost by 2.5 points. So, Goddard hangs onto that ball and gets 5 more yards forward or 1 more catch the rest of the game, and Austin would have won this. But great win for Nick. This was big for him to move to 5-5 and to keep Austin at 5-5. And he does it despite starting Ezekiel Elliott, who didn't even play, which was announced a couple of days before the game. So very questionable roster management by Nick. Probably cost himself 9 points, assuming he would have thrown Melvin Gordon into the lineup. But it doesn't come back to bite him. And Austin at full strength, we know he's a high-flying team with the Dolphins, most of the Dolphins' offense Couldn't quite pull it out. So big win for Nick in this one. And then our next matchup was Morgan getting the win 101-63 over Thomas. For Thomas, great performance from Justin Fields, terrible performance from everyone else. Justin Fields had over 60% of his points with 39. Thomas finishes with 63. Really, more of the same for him. He's just got nothing depth-wise, pretty much no startable players. Joe Mixon was on bye this week, and DeAndre Swift just hasn't got it done. And now Juju Smith-Schuster's hurt, so the hits keep coming for Thomas. And for Morgan, his team's really rounding into form, winning some of these games. He's only got 4 wins. So he's kind of behind the rest of the pack, but this was a nice win for him to take care of business against an overmatched Thomas team. The next game was mine. Ben took the win, 99-81. Good win for Ben. Earlier in the season, I would have looked at this game and said, "Oh, I've still got Ben and Thomas in the last 5 weeks. Going to be some easy wins." That would have got me to 7 wins if I would have won both of those games. But now here we are. On the surface, it kind of is a little bit like last year when I was in a good position to make the playoffs. Then I lost to Zach's winless team because of how bad we perceived Ben's team to be. But Ben was the favorite in this one, and as I look at it now, Ben's roster is really coming together, and is maybe a top 4 or 5 roster in the league, maybe even better than that. Patrick Mahomes, 30-point game. He's been awesome this year, and now he's finally got his running backs back and healthy. Good win for Ben to keep his candle burning a little bit longer, to keep his chance of sneaking into the playoffs still there. And then the last game we haven't talked about yet is Grant getting the win, 93-89 over Dan. This was an ugly one, sloppy game. Grant had a lot of guys on bye. Dan had a lot of guys on bye. These are the ones that you just got to kind of grit the teeth and get through and get the win. And Grant got it done. A good defensive performance by the Titans. A good quarterback performance for Trevor Lawrence, and really not much else, but that was about all it took in this one. And for Dan, Chase Claypool really let him down, but he didn't have many other options with all the bye weeks with his Patriots and Bengals being on bye. So not the worst loss for Dan, but definitely for his playoff hopes, not ideal, as he's now back to the fray at 5-5. So we kind of talked about the standings and where everyone's at. It's really difficult to discern who's the best and the worst team at this point in the year. There's just too much uncertainty with all that's been going on, with just the amount of teams that are in the mix, everyone being 5-5. It's really hard to tell. We can, look at the luck rankings a little bit and just see, whose luck is pumping them up, whose luck is holding them back. And the one team that sticks out is Grant. He's over 2 wins more than expected with his 6-4 record. Projections would have him closer to 4-6. And then Hunter obviously is 1.7 wins over expected, and that's allowed him to get 9-1 and really pull away. And then I'm actually the only other team over a game ahead of expected. My team really hasn't performed well this year, but winning a couple games that I shouldn't has kept me in the mix. And on the other end, Morgan, Nick, Colin, all those teams have lost nearly a game more than they should have. And so that's kind of basically what's happened is some of the better teams have had bad luck, some of the worst teams have had good luck, and so everyone ends up at 5-5. If I had to power rank these teams, it's difficult to sort out because there's so many teams close together. Obviously, Hunter's got to be number 1. He's got 9 wins already. He's a lock to make the playoffs. I don't see how you could really argue against Hunter at number 1. And then it's really, to me, it's between Dan and Colin at number 2. Dan takes a hit with the Jamar injury, which looks to be maybe more serious than initially thought. Colin's team has lost some games that he shouldn't have lost, but that Josh Allen, Austin Eckler pairing has been so good for him, and now he's got Amon-Ra finally back and healthy, and Hollywood Brown back. So I lean Colin at 2. I've got Dan at 3. At 4, you look at the teams that are really making a run lately, and it's hard to look past Joe. He's had good performances every week. He was the 3rd highest scoring team this week despite not getting the win. So I've got Joe at 4, Nick's 5 for me. I think his team's pretty deep. He's got a lot of options with all those receivers. Still hasn't made a trade to acquire a running back. That's still a weak point for him. with having to roll out, A.J. Dillon or Ezekiel Elliott or Deonta Foreman. But the receivers are really good and really deep. So I like Nick at 5. And then going down the list, this is where it starts to really get difficult. I've got Austin at 6. Austin could easily be a top 2 team, but he's just had some tough luck this year. And I don't know about having all those Dolphins guys, a couple of bad down scoring weeks for the Dolphins, and he's going to get losses that he shouldn't. And so I have a little bit of questioning or a little bit of questions about his ability to make the playoffs that maybe I don't have about Colin. So that's why I have Austin down at 6. And then at 7, this is tough for me. So I think I've got Zach at 7. He's got such top end talent. Obviously coming off a great week. It makes sense to put him there. Grant at 8 for me. I don't think his team is really that good. I like Chubb obviously, but his other running back options are not great. But he does have 6 wins, and that's a lot of the battle. He probably needs to win one more game to get in the playoffs. So I can't really justify dropping him too far. And then after that, let's see, I had Zach at 6, Grant at 7. So then after that, I've got Morgan at 8. His team's only got 4 wins, but I think he's got a high-powered squad. He could score a lot with Dameon Pierce and Kenneth Walker really emerging in his backfield. I would have a hard time putting myself ahead of him. So I've got me at 9. At 5 and 5, I'm in good position, but I've gotten lucky. And with the Cooper Kupp injury, this is where I belong. My team is certainly not going to be favored many weeks the rest of the year. But just do your best, try to get in the playoffs and see what happens. And then at 10 or at 11, it's Ben. I think Ben's team has gotten a lot better. Like I said, I think you could easily argue he's one of the top 3 or 4 lineups in the league. The trouble is he's only got 3 wins right now, which means he essentially needs to run the table to make the playoffs. And so then that leaves Thomas at 12. I think Thomas is cooked. Too many injuries, too much to overcome. He just can't do it. And then quickly looking ahead to this week, we'll just preview the matchups real quick. I'm going to run through them in the order that they're on my screen because I don't really know the projections off the top of my head. But we've got me as a 109 to 101 favorite, obviously after the Thursday night big game from Christian Watson against Nick. I'm going to pick Nick in this one. I'm worried about some of my receiving options. I'm worried about Gus Edwards really having what his role is going to be when he comes back. And Nick getting Mike Williams back to stack with Justin Herbert is a big boost. So I've got Nick rolling in this one. My next matchup is Austin and Grant. Austin at 5 and 5, Grant at 6 and 4, but Austin's got bye week hell here with Tua, Tyreek, and Raheem all on bye. Grant right now is projected a 101 to 83 victory, and it's hard for me to pick Austin in this setting. He's starting Tristan Ebner as one of his flexes, Tyler Algier in his running back spot. This is just rough for Austin. Bye week comes at a bad time. This is why I had him that low in my rankings because he's only got 5 wins. If he loses this one, he's going to have to play really well for the rest of the season to make it. But I've got Grant here. The next matchup, the 2 teams sitting at the bottom of the standings, Thomas at 3 and 7 and Ben at 3 and 7. And Ben's projected to thump Thomas 105 to 76. Their teams are just heading in different directions, both at 3 and 7. But I have faith that Ben can salvage the momentum here and get the win and move on with his playoff chances. For Thomas, he made a couple of decent moves to stabilize his lineup, getting Brandon Cooks, Taysom Hill, picking some guys up off the waiver wire with Sony Michel, J.D. McKissick that he could plug in. But I don't think Juju Smith-Schuster is going to play. In fact, I'm pretty confident he's not. Thomas still has him in. I don't know how you could possibly still start Robbie Anderson at this point in the year. So don't know what Thomas is doing here, but Ben's going to roll. Thomas projected, or next up is Hunter projected 120. He's already got 35 points for the Thursday night game between Derrick Henry and Aaron Jones against Colin, projected 115. This is a high-scoring matchup. The 2 top teams in the league. And things have broken right all year for Hunter. Things have broken wrong all year for Colin. That's why they're 4 games apart in the standings. I don't think the teams are that far apart in real life. And so I think Colin's due for a little good luck here. I'll take Colin. Our next matchup is Morgan taking on Zach. Zach's projected a big winner here, 116 to 100. No Thursday night players, but Morgan does have Kenneth Walker and Jeff Wilson both on bye. which are some big losses in his lineup. But I still like Morgan. I think he's got a good chance here. I don't know why, but I think his team's a little bit underrated. And I look at Zach's team. I'm not sure Njoku's going to play. His flexed out with Darnell Mooney, Antonio Gibson isn't really inspiring to me. So he's still relying on Saquon, Dalvin, and Stephon Diggs to have great games all around. And I just think Morgan's got a few more options to rely on. So I'll take Morgan. And then our last matchup, Joe and Dan, projected very close. Joe 99.6, Dan 98.6. Of course, Joe dealing with bye weeks, T.J. Waddle and Travis Etienne, while Dan's got Chris Godwin on bye. So some big losses there. I think the Jamar Chase factor is huge here. Joe Burrow loses his top option, and Dan loses his top receiver as well. He only has a chance here because Joe is losing a couple of guys on bye, but this is a huge game at a crucial time of the year. Joe doesn't lose these. I've got Joe easily. Dan's he's a great regular season team, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him get it done. But I just feel like Joe's team is trending in the right direction, and he's had a couple of bad breaks, which is uncharacteristic for Joe. So the good fortune is coming. So I'll take Joe here. But anyway, that'll wrap things up for this quick Saturday night recording of Are You Ready for a Podcast? Had to get something on the channel this week. We haven't missed a mid-season week yet. We did fail to record an episode at the end of last year, but had to get something on the channel. So thank you guys for tuning in, and hopefully next week we'll be back with something resembling more of what you're used to with the interview and all. But anyway, thanks for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.
This telecast is copyrighted by the NFL for the private use of our audience. Any other use of this telecast or of any pictures, descriptions, or accounts of the game without the NFL's consent is prohibited.